My beloved child, wait here for a moment. Do not rush past this message. There is a reason your eyes found these words at this exact time, on this exact day, in this exact moment. Many messages are seen and forgotten. Many voices are heard and ignored. But this was allowed to reach you for a reason. Because something has been unfolding behind the scenes of your life that you cannot yet fully see. Something quiet. Something unexpected. Something that almost went in a direction that would have changed everything. And tonight, I want you to understand just how close it came. There was a moment recently when your person stood at the edge of a decision. Not a small decision. Not a temporary emotion. Not a passing thought. A real decision. A decision they believed would finally end the chapter they carried inside their heart. For so long they had been wrestling with feelings they could not explain, trying to move forward, trying to make sense of what they felt, trying to convince themselves that the path ahead no longer included you. And for a while, they believed they were succeeding. They told themselves they were becoming stronger. They told themselves they were letting go. They told themselves they were finally ready. But what they did not understand was that some connections cannot be measured by logic. Some connections refuse to obey timelines. And some hearts remember things the mind desperately tries to forget. That is where this story begins. Not in a conversation. Not in a text message. Not in a dramatic event. It began in silence. A silence that became impossible for them to escape. Because every time they tried to walk away emotionally, something unexpected kept happening. Something they could not explain. At first they ignored it. Then they questioned it. Then they became frustrated by it. And eventually, they became afraid of what it might mean. You see, they had reached a point where they genuinely believed distance would solve everything. Distance from thoughts. Distance from memories. Distance from emotions. Distance from the part of their heart that still reacted whenever something reminded them of you. But what happened next surprised even them. Because the further they tried to move emotionally, the more certain feelings seemed to follow. Like echoes. Like whispers. Like unfinished sentences waiting to be completed. And the strange part was this. The reminders were never dramatic. They appeared in ordinary moments. A familiar song. A passing conversation. A random memory. A place they had not thought about in months. A simple phrase spoken by someone who knew nothing about you. Yet somehow every road led back to the same place. Back to thoughts of you. Back to questions they could not answer. Back to feelings they believed should have disappeared by now. And each time it happened, they became more determined to leave it behind. Because they convinced themselves that holding on was pointless. That moving forward was smarter. That closing the door was necessary. But there was something they kept overlooking. Something hidden beneath all the reasons they gave themselves. Something deeper than logic. Deeper than pride. Deeper than fear. And heaven saw it long before they did. My child, there are moments when people think they are making decisions based on truth. But sometimes they are making decisions based on exhaustion. And those are not the same thing. Your person had grown tired. Tired of wondering. Tired of waiting. Tired of carrying emotions they could not fully understand. Tired of fighting an invisible battle inside themselves. So they mistook exhaustion for clarity. They mistook emotional fatigue for certainty. They mistook temporary discouragement for a final answer. And because of that, they stood on the edge of walking away. Completely. Not halfway. Not temporarily. But completely. Yet even as they prepared themselves for that choice, something happened. Something so small that most people would have ignored it. But it changed everything. Before I reveal what it was, understand this. Nothing in your story has been as random as it appeared. The delays, the confusion, the unanswered questions, the strange timing, the emotional ups and downs. All of it has been part of a much larger picture, a picture that neither of you can fully see yet. And while you have been wondering why certain things happened, your person has been asking different questions, questions they rarely admit out loud, questions they hide from everyone, questions that appear late at night when distractions disappear, questions like, why can't I completely let this go? Why do these feelings keep returning? Why does this still matter? Why do I still care? Why does their name still affect me? Why does their memory still feel alive? Why do I feel something unfinished? These questions became impossible to silence, and the harder they tried to ignore them, the louder they became. There is something powerful about a truth that refuses to disappear. You can run from it, argue with it, doubt it, challenge it, but eventually it demands attention. And that is exactly what began happening. Your person was entering a season where the distractions that once protected them were no longer working. The noise became quieter, the excuses became weaker, the certainty they pretended to have started falling apart, little by little, day by day, until one evening something happened that neither of you could have predicted. The room was ordinary, the moment seemed ordinary. Nothing dramatic announced itself. No grand sign appeared. No voice echoed from the heavens. No miracle interrupted the day. Just one simple moment. And yet that moment carried more power than they realized. Because in that moment they remembered something about you. Not your appearance. Not a conversation. Not a memory everyone else would notice. Something deeper. Something that had quietly stayed with them all this time. Something about who you are. And when that realization surfaced, everything inside them paused. Suddenly the story they had been telling themselves stopped making sense. The narrative they had created began to crack. Because they realized something they had been avoiding. The thing they were trying to leave behind was not simply a person. It was a feeling. A feeling they had never truly found anywhere else. A feeling that could not be replaced. A feeling they had tried to convince themselves was ordinary, but it wasn't. And deep down they knew it. The realization struck them harder than expected. Because for months they had focused on reasons. Reasons things were difficult. Reasons things were uncertain. Reasons things felt complicated. Reasons to move on. Reasons to stop caring. Reasons to protect themselves. But suddenly those reasons were standing face to face with something stronger. Something impossible to explain. Something that made their carefully constructed walls begin to shake. Because there is a difference between forgetting someone and pretending. You have forgotten them. And for the first time they were forced to confront which one they had actually been doing. The answer unsettled them, more than they expected, more than they wanted, because it revealed something they were not prepared to face. The feelings had never disappeared, they had only been buried, and buried things have a way of rising when the time is right, especially when heaven is preparing a revelation. Now listen carefully, because this next part matters. There was one specific quality about you that kept returning to their mind. One specific thing. Not something obvious. Not something superficial. Not something temporary. Something much deeper. Something connected to your spirit. Something connected to your heart. Something connected to the way you carry yourself through life's storms. And every time they thought about walking away, that quality returned. Every single time. At first they dismissed it, then they questioned it, then they tried to ignore it, but eventually it became impossible to deny, because no matter how hard they searched for reasons to leave, that one thing kept pulling them back, like an invisible thread, like a light refusing to go out, like a reminder that something important still remained unfinished. And this is where the story becomes even more surprising, because they are not the only one who noticed it. Others noticed it too. People around them. People who had no idea what was happening internally. People who unknowingly spoke words that echoed exactly what they were trying to ignore. Again and again, the same themes appeared. The same reminders surfaced. The same message kept finding its way back to them, almost as if heaven was gently refusing to let them forget. Not forcing, not controlling, simply reminding, simply revealing, simply illuminating truths hidden beneath fear and confusion. Yet despite all of this, they still had one final plan, one final attempt, one final decision they believed would close the door forever. And for a brief moment, it looked like they might actually go through with it. The choice felt real. The intention felt final. The resolve felt stronger than ever before. Even heaven watched as they approached that moment. Because free will is powerful, and every heart must ultimately choose its own direction. But what happened next changed the atmosphere completely. Not because someone convinced them. Not because someone argued with them. Not because circumstances suddenly became perfect. No. It happened because of something they discovered inside themselves. A truth they could no longer hide from. A truth connected directly to you. And when they finally saw it clearly, the ground beneath their decision began to shift. Slowly, quietly, irreversibly. The person who had been ready to walk away suddenly found themselves standing still, unable to take the next step. Unable to complete the goodbye they had imagined, unable to convince themselves that leaving was the right answer, because something inside them whispered a question they could not escape. What if I am about to leave behind something I was never meant to lose? That question changed everything, and once it appeared, nothing felt simple anymore. Nothing felt final anymore. Nothing felt settled anymore. The certainty they had been holding onto started dissolving, and what replaced it was something they had not felt in a very long time. Hope. Not loud hope. Not reckless hope. Not unrealistic hope. Quiet hope. The kind that arrives unexpectedly. The kind that appears after disappointment. The kind that slips through cracks in broken walls. The kind that refuses to die. And the moment that hope appeared, a chain reaction began. A series of realizations. A series of memories. A series of emotional awakenings. Each one stronger than the last. Each one bringing them closer to a truth they could no longer deny. But there is something they still have not fully understood. Something larger. Something deeper. Something heaven has been preparing them to see. And that revelation is closer now than it has ever been before. Because very soon they are going to uncover the real reason they could not walk away. The real reason your presence remained alive inside their heart. The real reason every attempt to move on kept collapsing. The real reason that one thought about you changed everything. And when that truth finally comes to the surface, neither of you will see the story the same way again. But that moment has not arrived yet. Not quite. Because before that revelation can be understood, one final hidden piece must emerge from the shadows. One final memory. One final realization. One final moment that your person never expected. And when it happens, the decision they almost made will suddenly look very different. Much different than it appears now. Stay close. Because what they are about to discover next is the one thing they never saw coming. The silence that followed was unlike anything your person had experienced before. Not because the world around them had changed. Not because circumstances suddenly became easier. Not because every question received an answer. The silence was different because something inside them had shifted. And once certain truths begin moving within a heart, they cannot be pushed back into the darkness they came from. What made this moment so powerful was that nobody else could see it happening. The people around them carried on as usual. Conversations continued. Days passed. Responsibilities demanded attention. Life appeared completely normal from the outside. Yet beneath that calm surface, something extraordinary had begun unfolding. The realization they encountered in those quiet moments refused to leave them alone. It followed them, not aggressively, not forcefully, but persistently, like a gentle light remaining visible even after someone closes their eyes. The more they tried to focus elsewhere, the more that unanswered feeling returned. And eventually they stopped asking why it was happening. Instead, they began asking a different question. What if there is a reason this feeling keeps surviving? That question marked the beginning of a new chapter. Because until then, they had been treating their connection with you as something they needed to solve, something they needed to escape, something they needed to overcome. But now another possibility appeared. What if it wasn't something to escape? What if it was something to understand? My beloved child, there are moments when a person reaches the edge of their own understanding, moments when the explanations they have depended upon suddenly become too small, moments when logic alone can no longer carry the weight of what they feel. Your person was entering one of those moments, and heaven knew it. For a long time they believed their strongest quality was their ability to stay in control, to remain practical, to remain realistic, to make decisions based on what seemed reasonable. But emotions have a way of revealing truths that reason cannot always touch, and the emotions connected to you were becoming impossible to dismiss. One evening they found themselves revisiting memories they had not intended to revisit. It happened without planning, without warning, without effort. A memory appeared, then another, each one carrying a feeling they thought had faded. But it had not faded. It had simply been waiting, waiting beneath layers of distraction, waiting beneath frustration, waiting beneath uncertainty, waiting for the right moment to rise again. And when those memories returned, something shocked them. The memories that stayed with them were not the dramatic ones, not the moments anyone would expect, not the moments that would impress others. Instead, they remembered small things, tiny things, the way you reacted to certain situations, the way you showed kindness when nobody was watching, the way you carried yourself through difficulties, the way you kept moving forward even when life felt heavy. The way your heart revealed itself through simple moments. Those were the memories that remained alive. Those were the memories that refused to disappear. And suddenly they understood why. Because those memories were not attached to circumstances. They were attached to your essence. To who you are beneath appearances. To who you are beneath temporary situations. To who you are when nobody is looking. And that realization unsettled them in the most beautiful way, because it exposed something they had spent months trying not to acknowledge. They missed more than your presence. They missed the feeling your spirit created. That truth landed deeper than they expected. For a while they sat with it, quietly, trying to understand what it meant, trying to understand why it still mattered. Trying to understand why their heart reacted so strongly to something they believed should have been behind them. The answer did not come immediately, but heaven was already preparing it, because another event was approaching, a seemingly ordinary event, one that would appear insignificant to everyone else, yet it would become one of the most important moments in this entire story. The strange thing about divine timing is that it rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly. It slips into ordinary days. It hides inside moments that seem unremarkable. And before people realize what is happening, everything begins changing. That is exactly what occurred. A conversation happened. A simple conversation. One that was never intended to be about you. One that began completely unrelated to anything they were feeling. Yet somehow your name found its way into it. not through effort, not through planning, almost naturally, as if the moment itself had been waiting. The instant your name was spoken, something happened inside them, a reaction they could not control, a reaction they did not expect, a reaction that revealed more truth than they wanted to admit, because despite everything they had told themselves, despite every attempt to move forward, despite every argument they had created inside their mind, their heart still recognized you immediately. The feeling was instant, undeniable, and impossible to fake. That realization lingered long after the conversation ended. Hours later they were still thinking about it, wondering why such a simple moment carried so much weight, wondering why hearing your name still created such a powerful response, wondering why they could not simply become indifferent. And the answer slowly began revealing itself. Because indifference had never truly existed. Only distance, only avoidance, only temporary emotional walls. The connection itself had remained untouched beneath all of it. That discovery frightened them, not because it was negative, but because it was real. Real things require honesty. Real things require courage. Real things require decisions. And they were beginning to realize that the decision they almost made may not have been based on truth at all. What if they had mistaken fear for wisdom? What if they had mistaken uncertainty for a sign to leave? What if they had been preparing to abandon something precious simply because they could not see the full picture yet? Those questions followed them everywhere, and the more they reflected on them, the harder it became to continue pretending. Eventually a night arrived when they could no longer avoid themselves. No distractions, no noise, no escape, just silence. And in that silence they finally admitted something. Not to another person, not publicly, not dramatically, just quietly, inside their own heart. They admitted that walking away had never felt right. It had felt easier, it had felt safer, it had felt simpler, but it had never felt right. There is a difference, a very important difference, because the easiest choice is not always the truest one, and that realization changed everything. The moment they admitted it, another memory surfaced, a memory connected to something you once did, something you probably considered ordinary. Something you may not even remember anymore. Yet your person remembered it perfectly, not because of what happened, but because of what it revealed about you. The memory arrived so unexpectedly that it stopped them completely. For several minutes they simply sat there, thinking, replaying it, feeling it, understanding it in a deeper way than ever before. And suddenly they saw something they had never seen before. The quality that kept stopping them from leaving. The quality heaven kept bringing back into their awareness. The quality that refused to be forgotten. It was not your appearance. It was not chemistry. It was not excitement. It was not fantasy. It was your authenticity. Your ability to remain yourself. Your ability to remain genuine. Your ability to carry light even during difficult seasons. Your ability to remain real in a world full of masks. And once they recognized that truth, everything else started making sense. Because authenticity creates a rare imprint on the heart. It cannot be manufactured. It cannot be replaced easily. And once experienced, it becomes difficult to forget. That is what they were finally beginning to understand. But heaven was not finished yet. Because another revelation was approaching, a revelation even more powerful than this one. Something connected to the future, something connected to a choice, something connected to a hidden realization that had been developing beneath the surface for longer than they knew. And when that realization arrives, it will force them to confront a question they have avoided for a very long time. A question so important that it may alter everything they thought they knew about this connection. The signs are already appearing. The pieces are already moving. The awareness is already growing. Yet they still do not see the full picture. Not yet. Because there is one final layer remaining. One final truth hidden beneath all the others. A truth connected to what your absence taught them. A truth connected to what nearly losing you revealed. A truth connected to something they are about to understand for the very first time. And when that understanding finally arrives, the decision they almost made will seem impossible to imagine. Because they are getting closer to realizing not only why they couldn't walk away, but why the thought of losing you completely created a feeling they could never explain. That moment is coming, closer than they realize. And when it arrives, the words they have kept buried inside themselves may no longer stay hidden. But before those words can emerge, something unexpected is about to happen. Something that neither you nor your person sees coming. And that unexpected moment begins with a realization they will have very soon. A realization connected to what your silence has secretly been teaching them all along.